We are currently going through a shift in ways of thinking about the economy and how it works. Previous ideas, which used to be orthodox, like how everything should be governed by the market, are falling out of favour because they haven't worked very well. Many economists are looking elsewhere for different kinds of ideas. One place they're looking to is ancient China. The well-known economist Isabella Weber has been at the forefront lately in introducing different ways of thinking about how to govern the economy. Recently, she said this: "A window for new policy thinking has opened. There is a bit of fresh air coming in. Now that we have dispensed with old shibboleths, we can take another look at economic history to reconsider conventional wisdom and develop fast, fair, effective ways of managing new kinds of economic instabilities." And she's a scholar of China, so for her, an obvious place to look is going to be back into Chinese history. Weber has been very involved in the recent debates on how to govern inflation. And in the face of actually quite a lot of resistance, she's been arguing in favour of strategic selective price controls. She says we need to figure out which commodities are key essentials, such as oil and gas, and apply price controls strategically to those selected sectors in times of real instability. What's really interesting is how similar these ideas are to those found in the Guanzi. This is a core text on Chinese ancient thought on economic thinking and in particular price stabilization. Weber has written about it in this article here, which is also now available in a book chapter, and I'll post the reference to that under this video. So first, a bit of background context. During the ancient Western Zhou period, markets and prices had been very strictly controlled by the state. But as the Western Zhou collapsed into several different states, becoming eventually what was known as the Warring States period, there was a burgeoning of trading in commodities and a class of private merchants began to emerge. According to Weber, the rulers of these states turned to the merchants for help in how to govern the newly emerging market economy. And this is the context in which the Guanzi was written. It was written by several anonymous authors who were most likely state planners or economic advisors. The Guanzi puts forward the idea of qing zhong. That means light, qing, and heavy, zhong. This tells us to divide commodities into those which are heavy, that means essential for production and human well-being, and those which are light, non-essential. In order to govern well, to enrich the state and to ensure the well-being of the people, the ruler had to regulate the price of those heavy commodities, basically in order to get state revenue and to keep the cost of living under control. And in the Warring States period, the most important commodity was grain because that's what everyone lived on. But importantly, whether a commodity was heavy or light and how heavy or light it was depended on circumstances and also its relationship to other commodities. It wasn't fixed. So the ruler had to pay careful attention to what was going on within the state in order to figure out how to regulate the price. For example, and of course I'm simplifying here, after the grain harvest in the autumn, there was lots of grain, so grain was cheap. But this wasn't good for the peasants who were growing the grain and then selling it because they couldn't make very much money. But several months later, in the summer, before the next grain harvest, there wasn't very much grain around, and this was bad for people who wanted to buy the grain because at this point it was very scarce, so the price went up. So the role of the ruler is to keep the price regulated throughout the year to keep everybody happy. So the ruler would take grain off the market and store it right after the harvest, so there was less of it about, and this would push up the price and then release it back onto the market later on in the year when there was less of it around, so that everyone had enough to eat. This also meant that at times of emergency there was enough grain kept in storage. So at times of famine, for example, the entire economy didn't collapse and people didn't starve. And during the yearly cycle, the state didn't balance out the price completely. They would carefully adjust it so that grain was still more expensive in the autumn than it was in the summer. And through this difference in price, the state would take its revenue. So everyone had enough to eat, everyone could afford enough to eat, and the state still got richer. Now, I'm not saying here that Weber has been applying the Guanzi directly to current debates on inflation, but it does seem to be one of several influences on her thinking. She does certainly seem to be advocating for a wider set of resources for us to draw on, both from history and from different parts of the world, as we try to think how to govern the economy and markets. Thank you for watching.